Of this. Earlier this morning, I sat down with one of the key players on this infrastructure plan, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. I started our conversation by asking him about his plan today to meet with GOP senators and what they're saying behind the scenes.
What I can say is that these conversations are productive, and we're continuing to look for where there may be common ground and ask the Republican senators and also House members we're talking to, what are their ideas, both in terms of where the investments ought to go and how to pay for them. And, the president has often said that the only real red lines so far for him are, one, we're not going to raise taxes on anybody making less than $400,000. And two, doing nothing is not an option. This is a moment that calls for a big investment, a big vision. Now we're seeing just how big of a vision we might be able to agree on.
Republicans don't disagree. They certainly say there's something to do here. Is there a specific number that your administration would be willing to accept?
Well, I think that's the conversation that we're having. But again, this is not a time for incremental tinkering around the edges. My department estimates that there is more than $1 trillion backlog in the United States right now, just in terms of taking care of the transportation infrastructure that we've got. Then you look to the future and what it would need to grow our economy, what it would take to make sure that America and not other countries are leading the electric vehicle revolution that is coming. And we know that we've got to have a high level of ambition and a high level of boldness here. So turning that into math, obviously that's the sausage making that's underway right now. But what I will say is the conversations are frequent, they're productive. I think we're at the table in good faith, and we're going to see how far we can get.
The need is so great and the numbers are so big that even if you broke it up, it would be tough to argue that it's just tinkering around. When you look at that cracked bridge in Memphis, it's been shut down for days. And there's situations like this across the country. Would you be open to passing just the $621 billion for roads, bridges, and traditional infrastructure and focus on the other aspects of the bill afterwards?
We think one of the greatest traditions in American infrastructure is the tradition of expanding our horizons. In other words, the things we call traditional now didn't used to be, whether we're talking about railroads, whether we're talking about the interstate highway system. That's why you see newer things like broadband in the president's package. We actually see a lot of bipartisan support for ideas like broadband. It's tougher when we get into some of the things that we think are necessary to tear down barriers that people face in their lives, like caregiving. But we're continuing to make the case for how they fit. There are numbers of different ways, just mechanically, that these things can move through Congress. Right now, in the House and Senate, the committees that routinely work on things like surface transportation and highway spending and investment are already at work putting together their vision, and then this is something we have to fit into it. So yes, there are a lot of different ways that we can get there, but the important thing is we have to get there.
As important as it is to expand our idea of infrastructure, it's easier said than done. And we do hear from some Democrats who are saying, why are we wasting time? Republicans are never going to play ball. We should just get this thing done alone through reconciliation. Here's the issue. You've got a real risk that the Senate parliamentarian says a lot of the stuff here isn't infrastructure, in the same way that they cut out the minimum wage hike from the American Rescue Plan. Are you prepared for that reality if you do go at it alone?
Look, we have a lot of policy work to do, some of which can happen through reconciliation, but a lot of it can't. So it's clearly preferred to do this on a bipartisan basis. It allows us to have a more robust policy, and I think it's something the American people are looking for. But we're not doing it for its own sake, and we're not going to be allowing the clock to keep ticking indefinitely, because as you pointed out, we've got pieces of infrastructure like the I-40 bridge. They're not waiting for congressional politics. They are responding to the laws of physics. And those laws don't care whether we've been able to go through all of the procedural hoops. We just got to get it done.
Well,
so there's a sense of impatience on the part of the public, certainly on the part of the president, and that is shaping the conversations that are happening right now.
Then how are you going to pay for it? If your red line is no one who makes less than $400,000 will have their taxes raised, and Republicans' red line is no corporate taxes will be raised, what about using unused COVID relief money?
Well, let's remember that things like the rescue plan and the other COVID relief bills went to something very specific. Sometimes dollars are being referred to as unused just because they haven't actually gone out in the form of reimbursements. But that's how reimbursements work. And when you look at something like the transit dollars that went out, that was to keep systems up and running. Meanwhile, we have a $105 billion repair backlog on our transit systems, let alone the need to actually expand and improve them. So I don't think that we want to fool ourselves into believing that there are heaps of money just sort of sitting around. We need to actually commit to finding ways to pay for this. Now, the president put forward a way to do it.
How are you going to pay for it? If it's the preferred goal to work with Republicans and they are saying it is a non-starter, they won't raise corporate taxes, how are you going to pay for it?
First of all, there are a lot of things we can do on corporate taxes. The part that's getting the most attention in the president's proposal is the rate. And we think 28 is a good rate. It's lower than it's been most of my lifetime, but enough to actually get the job done. But you also look at the loopholes. You look at the incentives that basically motivate corporations to park jobs as well as profits overseas. And those can do a lot of work, too. So part of what we are trying to get from the Republicans right now is a clearer picture of where their red lines are. I recognize that a lot of them sincerely view the tax cuts of the last administration as an important achievement. Obviously, we have a different view. We believe that corporations need to be doing more to pay their fair share. But that's exactly the kind of back and forth that we're having right now, and we're going to see how far we can get.
Closing loopholes. The majority of the American people certainly want that to happen. I want to ask you about the state of Michigan. The president is headed there today. In this plan, there's a huge investment in electric cars. And right now, people in Michigan are furious because GM announced they're opening a plant in Mexico, $1 billion investment. What if this plan goes through? These investments are made, but no jobs are created here, or not enough.
Well, our commitment is to growing jobs on American soil, and that's one of the reasons we need to be making the kinds of investments both in the supply chain and R&D and in purchasing vehicles all the way up, not just through the cars that the government purchases, but helping school corporations purchase electric school buses, helping transit agencies acquire those.
You can't control what private businesses do, right? We saw that when President Trump said, don't sell your house, you won't have to sell your houses in Lordstown, Ohio, and then he quickly realized, oh, those companies, they don't work for him. They don't work for this administration either. So how do you incentivize those companies to hire, to pay more, to do these things that you want them to do?
Right. So this is an important part of the president's vision. When we talk about the jobs plan encouraging electric vehicles to be built, to be adopted, to be produced, we're talking about creating American jobs. And we're certainly going to set up the policies in that direction. The president today visiting a facility that produces F-150s. And this is important because I think a lot of people, when they picture electric cars, they're not picturing pickup trucks. As a matter of fact, I had a member of Congress ask me, what good are electric vehicles to my rural district where people drive pickup trucks, not realizing that we have so many remarkable products being made in America, including these light-duty pickup trucks that are going to be coming on the market that are all electric. So the president's focusing on those that are not just an American company, but today you're going to see what's assembled right here in America, and you're going to continue to see our policies shape that. You're right. Companies have a lot of choices. And by the way, the electric vehicle market has a momentum on its own. The reason we need to make policy choices around electric vehicles is that momentum, that electric vehicle revolution, it may be happening one way or the other, but it's far from guaranteed that it will happen with American leadership unless we make those choices.
All right, Secretary Buttigieg, thank you for joining me this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you.